All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you here today. I am just given a few seconds here. I see some more attendees coming into the group here. Hello to everyone who's live. I know we'll have some people watching this later on the recording as well. So thank you for being here. So welcome to the Great Plains Association for College Admissions Counseling Virtual College Fair. We're so excited to have you here, and we have some fantastic schools here for this particular panel, but we also have several other sessions throughout the remainder of this evening that I would also point you towards. A couple housekeeping items that I want to just jump right in with before we get started with our content for today. First of all, my name's Laura. I'm your facilitator. So I am with StriveScan, not representing an institution today, just excited to be here with these lovely folks. You might have noticed that your camera and microphone are off, so our panelists cannot see or hear you. If you have questions though, we certainly want to hear those from you. So please utilize that Q&A button so you can use that throughout. Don't feel like you need to wait till the tail end. We would love to see your questions coming in as we're going and perhaps address those as we are going through the presentation. Again, just want to reiterate, this is one of many different sessions happening today. So you can find the full schedule at strivescan.com/GPACAC. You can also access all of the recordings, this one, as well as all of the rest of them on that same website. All right, so with that, I am going to turn it over to Emma, and she is actually going to introduce our speakers today. Take it away.
Well, good evening. Like Laura said, we're so thankful to have you all here with us. We have two financial aid experts who were gracious enough to educate us all this evening. Karen Porter is the Senior Financial Aid Advisor at Wichita State University. And we're also joined by Vicki Henderson, who is the Director of Student Financial Services at University of Tulsa. So they've created a great presentation. So I'm just going to let them take it away. And like Laura said, if you have questions along the way, make sure to put them in the Q&A so we can address those.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and launch into our presentation that we're going to have. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, I hope that everyone can see that clearly. Basically, what we're going to do today is we're going to cover a lot of financial aid information. And the whole idea is to be able to handle financial aid like a boss. My name is Karen Porter, and I'm the Senior Financial Aid Advisor at Wichita State University. And joining me will be Vicki Hendrickson from the University of Tulsa, who is co-presenting with me. So basically, what we're going to take things in different sections. So if you have any questions, use that chat or Q&A section to ask your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions. Today's topics. So the first thing we want to look at basically is some of the things that we will cover. Free money, or introduction to scholarships, is the first thing that we want to concentrate on. We want our students to have as much information as possible, so we will cover scholarships in just a little bit. Then we will go over the FAFSA information, what some of the new information that's out there, basically how to understand and prepare the information you will need to have available. Also, we're going to give you some expert tips, some of the things that we've seen throughout our careers to help you complete the FAFSA process smoothly. And then, of course, we'll have some questions at the end. So the first thing we want to look at are the types of scholarships that are out there. Of course, merit-based is usually something that's strictly based on your GPA, ACT, or SAT test scores, things along those lines. So each school will have a different way that they do this. So you want to make sure that you are checking with the schools that you are interested in to make sure that you're getting all of the information regarding the deadline dates, the priority dates, and anything that deals with that. Now, if you're dealing with athletic scholarships, those are usually handled through the coaches at each of the different institutions. So you want to make sure that you've been in contact with those coaches and that they know you're there and hopefully they've already been reaching out to you. Other things to look at is that each college or university may have different ways of doing their scholarships. Some of those scholarships are going to be specific to the major that you are in. So make sure that you are checking with an academic advisor or someone who can help you prepare in case there is a separate application for a college or departmental scholarship. The other thing that we want to make sure that our students are doing is looking for outside scholarships. These are scholarships that are not tied to a specific university. These are scholarships offered from outside sources. They can be regional, local, or national. There are lots of opportunities out there, so make sure you're checking with those things as well. So each state may also have different scholarships or grant programs. For instance, we have the State of Kansas Board of Regents that will take care of those kind of scholarships here in the state of Kansas. The link that would be for Kansas residents is kansasregents.org. For Oklahoma, you want to look at okcollegestart.org. That's where those particular scholarship opportunities will be. So make sure that you are checking with community organizations as well, whether it's a volunteer organization or maybe it's a professional organization that's tied to the major that you are seeking. Also, parents and students, both of you, please make sure that you're checking with your employers. See if there are any scholarships or tuition reimbursement opportunities that you can take advantage of. You also want to make sure that you check with various foundations. In Kansas, we have some foundations that are centered around certain parts of the state. So the advisors in our high schools may know of the local scholarship opportunities in our area. So be sure to check out scholarship opportunities in your area with your high school advisor. So the most important thing that when you're looking at outside scholarships is that you never want to pay a fee to apply for a scholarship. There's no reason for you to pay money to get money. So that really doesn't make any sense. So just be aware of that. Vicki, I will turn this over to you now, FAFSA and award offers.
Okay, thank you, Karen. We love to talk about the FAFSA. The acronym FAFSA actually means the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And this is the application that you as a student will go out and complete. The application is actually in your name. So it does, in most cases, we need parental income and student income on the application. But remember, when you are completing it, it's your application and you start off completing it with your name. Now then, you go to studentaid.gov, which is like a general landing page that the government has set up. It has just a variety of resources available on this particular site. It's where you'll go to get your electronic signatures. You have to have electronic signatures to sign off on the FAFSA. So the student will have that, and then at least one parent will need an FSA ID. You must have the student signature and a parental signature for the FAFSA to be valid. That can be obtained. Completing the FAFSA can be obtained by going to studentaid.gov. You can go out and watch different informational sites that will give you information on the differences between grants and loans, and you can complete master promissory notes out here on this site. So it's a fantastic site to bookmark. The other important thing about the FAFSA is that you will have to complete it on an annual basis. So I always recommend to my students to do something creative, perhaps set up in your contacts on your phone this website, but put the birth date as October the 1st so that you'll get a reminder that you need to go out and complete the FAFSA on an annual basis. And then you always want to check with the schools that you're attending to see what are their priority dates on when they want the FAFSA completed. Do they have dates or specific recommendations as to when they would like to have the FAFSA completed? Okay, and on the next slide, this is just a great resource that outlines if you're currently a freshman, a sophomore, junior, or senior, when will you be completing the FAFSA? And so it's saying basically that, like, if you're a senior, you're going to be attending school in the fall of 22 and 23, you can start completing the FAFSA as of this past October. It was available and open in October of 21, and it'll be available all the way through June 30th of 2023. Now, then the very last column tells you what year of tax return you're going to need in order to complete the FAFSA. So this particular piece is just a great source of information so that you will have a projection as to when you need to start thinking about completing the FAFSA. Okay, and on the next slide, it does go into a little bit more detail, and I had talked previously about the importance of the student applying for the FSA ID. I call it, it's basically an electronic signature, but you're going to go out to the site that we recommended earlier, and you will have a username and you'll create a password. The government can get that information to you fairly quickly. It can happen within as much as 1 to 3 days. What you do need to is keep this in a very safe location. You never share your password or your username with anybody, but this is what you will use to sign the FAFSA. Now then, when your parents go out and create their FSA ID, they can use it. If you have siblings, they can use it as their unique signature when they complete the FAFSA for your siblings. Or if your parents are going to college, they can use that signature for themselves when they're completing the FAFSA as well. Okay, and on the next slide, we're going to talk about the importance of eliminating any frustrations when you sit down to complete the FAFSA. I always recommend gather all of the documentations that you can and have it in place so that when you do sit down, you're not jumping up and running to get tax returns or getting your W-2s or trying to check your bank account to check for your assets. Plan ahead and collect all of that data ahead of time. It's very important that you grab your Social Security numbers for the student and for the parents. You're going to want to have, for seniors that are starting in the fall of 22, you're going to want to have your 2020 tax return. You're going to want to have your 2020 W-2s. You're going to want to know your savings and your assets. It's important to note that if your parents have sheltered retirement accounts, those do not have to be reported on the FAFSA, so don't get that information. It's a common mistake that families make is to report their retirement, but if it's a sheltered retirement account, it does not have to be reported on the FAFSA. So get all of that prepared. Okay. Now the next slide, this is a new thing that the government has come out with, and we just think it's awesome. Most students are much more comfortable with probably doing things on your phone or on an app, and the government has come out and created a My Student Aid app. You can actually, everything that we've talked about with the FAFSA, you can apply through the Student Aid app. You can go out there and create your FSA ID. You can file your FAFSA. When you want to apply for loans, you can complete your master promissory note here. If you want to keep up with your loans as you go through college, which we highly recommend that you do, this would be a site that would give you access to be able to see that. You can set it up for notifications to be pushed to you to keep you updated on information. So we think it's fantastic and recommend that all students load this on your phone, your iPad, different electronic devices, and absolutely use this. On the next slide, it's just a secondary application, but it will show you more of the information on the Student Aid app. Your parents can log in and use the Student Aid app as well as the student can. So it just gives you just a range of opportunities. And we kind of wanted to show you these pictures just to give you a comfort level with what you would be dealing with these. So we highly encourage that you use these. Karen, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Vicki. So next, we're going to talk about completing the FAFSA. Okay, so once you've gotten into the federal aid application and once you've gotten your FSA ID established, now we want to go through some of the steps that you're going to prepare for to actually complete the application. The information that the FAFSA will ask for will be in different sections. So we'll start with student information, which is demographic information with your name, address, social security number, your birth date, etc. All of those pieces of the puzzle that are important to put on to the FAFSA. The other thing that you'll need to address is what your housing options are. And the reason why they ask that is because most institutions have different cost of attendance or budget figures based on what your housing preference will be. For example, are you going to be on campus? Will you be living at home with your parents? Or if you are an older student, will you be living off campus, which means you are living on your own? You're not living on campus nor living with your parents. The other things you're going to be able to do here is to select what colleges you want to receive your information. There are a couple of ways that you can do it. You can either search by the name of the institution, or if you know the school code that you will be attending, you can directly type the code in. Excuse me. WSU school code is 001950, and Tulsa school code is 0000. Parents are also going to have to figure out their information based on their name, marital status, what state they are a resident of, and it's also going to ask for financial aid or for financial information from the parents. The household information, what this particular section is trying to obtain is how many people are being supported by the income sources in that household. You also want to include anyone else who is in college. So let's say that you're completing the FAFSA as an incoming freshman, but you have an older sibling who is also in college. You want to make sure that you enter that there are two in college. Or if you have a parent that's also attending, this is where things get a little tricky because you're still going to enter that there's only one in college, but there's a couple of steps, extra steps that you will need to do to include the parent who is also in college. Then once all the other information is filled in, you're going to go to the end of the FAFSA where you can legally sign it with your FSA ID. Your parents will sign it with their FSA ID, and then you're going to submit it. You may save the information as you go along if you don't quite know if you'll be able to fill it out at the same time. However, you don't want to submit it until both you and the parent has signed and dated the FAFSA. So a lot of times when we have questions, who is considered as the parent when you're completing the FAFSA, a lot of times we do have these questions. So basically the parents are your biological parents, the parents you are living with. Regardless of their marital status, you will need to combine their income or include both of their incomes on the FAFSA. If your parents are divorced or separated, you will need to enter the information who you primarily lived with within the last 12 months. If you live with both parents equally, enter the income information of the parent who has the lesser of the two incomes and who have the most family members in the household. If you have a divorced parent who is also remarried, you will need to include the income information for the step parent as well, because the FAFSA requires the total household income of where you are living. If you're living with grandparents, aunts, uncles, or other family members, those are not considered parents unless they have legally adopted you. There is a question as you're filling out your student information of if you are in a legal guardianship or a ward of the court or any of those types of situations. And if you have questions regarding that, please refer to your financial aid advisor who will be able to assist you with that, because sometimes there's additional documentation that you may need to submit to that financial aid office. Foster parents and legal guardians are not considered parents in this situation, even though they are supporting you at the time. The IRS data retrieval tool, or DRT, is the most accurate method to enter your and your parents' income information. You and your parents can access your income tax information directly from the IRS website, which will transfer the income information that the FAFSA requires, instead of you and the parent manually entering the information onto the FAFSA. In some situations, you are not able to use this. The most common one is when parents are married, but are filing separately. The DRT cannot be used in this case, and you will need to manually enter the separate income information. Now, if you use the DRT tool, it's very important not to change the information that has been transferred. If you type over the transferred information, it invalidates the data retrieval information, and then you will need to manually enter the information or check with your school for assistance on how to correct it. So what is financial need? The financial need is the main calculation we use to establish a student's need-based eligibility. So sometimes we refer to this as the financial aid need methodology or equation. So it starts with your cost of attendance, excuse me, or your budget, excuse me. This is something assigned by each school that looks at both direct and indirect cost, which includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and meals, personal expenses, and transportation expenses. The next thing that we do is look at the EFC, excuse me, or the expected family contribution. Excuse me. This is a result of the information that you provided on the FAFSA. This is the amount of money that you and your family can provide towards the cost of education for the upcoming academic year. So then the amount that's left over is a student's need. A lot of students are confused that need-based means that they have to be grant eligible, and that's not always the case. So when we're talking a needs figure, we're looking at what need-based aid that we can match you up with before you go into aid that is non-need based, because there is both. Some students don't realize how many students use financial aid. 82% of students in college use some type of financial aid. So it's not just a few people here and there, it's really a very large number of students who utilize some type of financial aid assistance. Okay, so ways to pay for college. There's different ways to pay for college because federal aid and scholarships are not something that can just cover everything. We try to encourage parents to know as early as possible that there are some things that they will need to help with. So here are various ways that you can help to prepare for those college expenses. So personal funds are a big thing. So if you have savings accounts that you have set up for your college expenses, if you have a 529 plan, these are very good ways to have available to help offset college expenses. Now, 529 plans are set up state by state, and each state has different scenarios in their plan. So if this is of interest to you, be sure to check out your particular state's plans for 529 plans. The other thing that we look at is institutional or state aid. Institutional aid is through the college or university and are typically scholarships. State aid is state scholarships, or it could be a state grant. Then we go into federal, state, and institutional grants. Grants are a really big thing because grants, as well as scholarships, are considered as gift aid, or money that you do not have to pay back. Other options on the federal side is a program called Work Study. And Work Study is a need-based aid program where a student works on or off campus and earns a wage, which they can apply towards their expenses if they choose to. So the last thing that we look at are student loans. However, student loans will need to be paid back, typically 6 months after a student graduates, or if the student drops below half-time status, that's when the loan goes into repayment. They are optional. You don't need to take out student loans if you don't need to. However, they are available if you need them. So these are the various ways to pay for college. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Vicki, who will speak to you about cost and affordability. So Vicki.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about cost and affordability. So on the slide that the next slide is going to break out all of the variables that go into your cost of attendance. And this is your budget that is prepared by your financial aid office. And as you can see, that budget is going to consist of your tuition and fees, and that's what you're paying the institution to attend classes and to be enrolled in classes. If you choose to live on campus, you're going to have room and meal charges to live there on campus. Then you need to purchase books in order to go along with the enrolled classes that you're going to be attending each semester. Now then, the government has allowed us to add 2 more categories into your budget, that being transportation and personal expenses, and then course fees. So sometimes when you're enrolling in classes, there might be a fee attached to it. Perhaps it's a lab fee, or if it's a music class, perhaps it's vocal lessons. There's different fees associated with being enrolled in classes. So just because you've paid tuition, you could incur a few more extra charges that are classified as fees. So these are the components that go into your cost of attendance budget. Now then, the columns to the right are going to show that if you're going to attend a state school, your tuition could vary if you're an in-state student or if you're an out-of-state student. In-state students pay far less because their tax base is different than out-of-state students. So we've given you just an example that perhaps if you're going in-state, your tuition might be $8,100. If you're an out-of-state student, your tuition might be $24,000. Now then, if you're choosing to attend a private institution, a private college, the tuition might even be more expensive than what you're seeing for state tuition prices. For instance, it could be $34,000. It's going to be dependent upon the school if you're choosing how expensive their tuition is. And this will be something that the college should very clearly communicate to you, and it should be listed on the offer letters that the financial aid office sends you. So this kind of gives you a good breakout as to, just an example of budgetary expenses to base your financial aid off of. Now then, on the next slide, what's very important to try to understand is when I was talking about the budget, there were charges that will go directly to the institution. And so if you're attending a university and you're choosing to live on that campus, you are going to pay them for tuition and fees. You will pay them for on-campus housing, and you'll pay them for a meal plan along with fees. So you're going to have, for instance, 18,100 to the 31,000 that we showed you on the budget. But on this next slide, what you're going to be able to see is that we call these indirect costs. These are costs that perhaps you're not going to pay the institution, but you still incur those expenses. And that's going to be book charges. If you don't live on campus, but you live off campus, it's going to be off-campus housing. If you live off campus, you're still going to have to eat. So you'll have your own expenses associated with eating. Then you're going to have transportation because you're going to need to ensure that you can get back and forth from living off campus to the campus. So these are considered indirect costs. Oftentimes that's a very confusing subject to students. So the direct costs are costs that you pay the institution. The indirect costs are costs that you will still incur, but you will incur them on your own. Okay. So let's talk about just the aid package in general. So the first column that we're going to look at is if this were a grant eligible student, we have what's classified as gift aid. Gift aid is something that you do not have to work for. You do not have to repay in the form of a loan. Gift aid could be scholarships and it could be grants. So in this first column, we're going to see that the student that was offered this, they had a grant along with a scholarship for a total package or for a total offer of $8,000. They were also offered a work study allotment and they were offered $5,500. So they were offered a total of $18,000. Now then, in the second column, that student has need, but they may not have qualified for governmental grant funding. So the gift aid is scholarship funding of $4,000. They get the $4,500 in work study, the $5,500 in loans. So they get a total of $14,000 in aid. Now then, the student that perhaps is a non-need-based student, they still get their scholarship money. So gift aid is scholarship. They qualify for a non-need-based loan, and they get a total of $9,500. So these amounts can apply towards those direct costs that we mentioned earlier. And if they get this money and it pays off their account, if they get any type of a refund, that money can be used to help pay for those indirect costs. Or if these apply and they still have a gap, then they can come in and borrow a parent loan. And the government allows students or parents to borrow a parent loan in their name. It is a loan that's based off of credit. So they'll authorize the government to run a credit check. And if it's approved, they can take up to that cost of attendance, less any type of aid that the student is receiving. And whatever the difference is the amount that the parent can borrow. So they give you options in order to help pay for your direct costs and your indirect costs. So how do you interpret the offer? You should always stop and look at your direct costs, and you should say, how much scholarships and grants am I being paid? How much am I receiving? I always recommend that if you're looking at 2 or 3 different schools, that you just lay this out and you look at your total direct costs, you subtract out your scholarship and grant aid, and you see what your out-of-pocket expense would be at that point. Just looking to interpret what will my out-of-pocket expenses be to my direct cost when I subtract out scholarships and grants. Is that scholarship going to be renewable? Is it a one-time scholarship or is it renewable for 8 semesters? How is it renewable? Is it based off of full-time enrollment with a specific grade point average in a specific major? Those are things that you're going to want to ask the schools that you're interested in attending. You're going to want to ask, does the scholarship apply to study abroad opportunities? If it does apply for specific majors, what happens if you change your major? What happens if you decide to sit out a semester? These are all questions that you're going to want to ask the institution that you're applying to so that you can fully understand your scholarship offer. Okay. Now then, in these offers, especially with the federal aid, there could be work study. And what work study is it's an opportunity to work on campus. I compare it very similar to working off campus at like a Starbucks or a Target, except you are located on campus. It's a great environment. We know the students are students first, and so there's a little bit more flexibility if you need to study or if you have to take off for various reasons to that extent. And so it's just a great opportunity. However, you do have to work in order to earn the funding. So you'll have to work, turn in a timesheet, and then understand that the government takes out a small amount of money for taxes. Now then, in most cases, and you're going to ask, you're going to need to check with your school, you're going to need to find out, is the work study, does it get applied directly towards my bursar account, or does the institution pay me directly? And then if I need that money to pay off my bursar account, I will use it to turn around and pay off my bursar account. So ask questions of your institution as to how that applies. Now then, on student loans have to be repaid. So the government's going to be very clear with you on your master promissory note and in that entrance loan counseling that you do, that this is a loan and that you're signing off on a promise that they will give you this much money, but then you must repay that. They're so serious about it that it is tied back to your credit. Paying back your loans can help you build a strong credit rating. If you don't handle your loans responsibly, it can harm your credit rating. So you want to handle these loans very, very seriously. Thus, that's why we will always counsel you. Do you need these loans? If you need these loans to obtain your education, then it is a good investment. If you don't need the loans, avoid taking those out because you do not want the debt. So make sure you're looking at that to ensure, is it really necessary to take out these loans? Make sure that you understand the interest rate that the government is charging. Is there an origination fee? What is the repayment terms? There's 2 different types of loans that the government gives you. They give you a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. Subsidized means the government pays the interest. Unsubsidized means the government does not pay the interest. So you're going to want to understand what type of loan you've qualified for. So make sure that you're understanding that as well. Now then, some schools, the costs are high enough that the federal loans do not cover all of them. And so if a student wants to take out a private loan versus their parents taking out the parent loan, there are opportunities for this. We just really want you to be educated on the private loan process. Make sure that you understand the repayment terms, how long you have to pay that off, what the interest rate is it fixed? Is it a variable rate? Make sure that you're well educated on those options before you enter into those agreements. And Karen, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Okay, so Thank you, Vicki. Quickly, we'll go over some expert tips and next steps. So how often should I apply for a scholarship? The first question students ask is this question. So our answer is apply for scholarships as often as you can. When it comes to institutional scholarships, they may have different applications and time periods. So you need to make sure that you know what those deadlines and those time periods are. So check with your institution about the outside scholarship dates. Spend at least 1 to 2 hours to review and apply for scholarships. You may receive a $500 scholarship for 1 hour of work, so it's worth it. What is the application looking for? A lot of apps look for a general essay, and some look for a specific essay. So make sure that you're answering the question specifically. It's kind of like a job interview. Make yourself shine. What do you do outside of the classroom? You know, sometimes you don't have a lot of time to do outside activities. So that helps the interviewer know who's accessing or looking over your scholarship application where your time is held up in. So if you don't have a lot of things on your activity chart or to show, you know, outside activities, it explains, you know, you work, you know, maybe you have children, or maybe your class time takes up a lot of time. So make sure that you point those things out in your application to help the interviewer or the observers know how you are spending your time. Be sure that you prepare ahead of time. In your senior year, speak with your family regarding your options and what you can afford. And of course, concentrate on 5 to 3 schools. And that way you can organize your thoughts and prepare accordingly to what that scholarship application is looking for. Once you have established your schools, be sure to know what your school's email account is, because typically that's how schools will communicate with you. They are secured email accounts so that no outside entity can access your important information. So be sure, you know, that you are checking that periodically. That way you'll know what your award offers are and how to respond back to the schools or school in regards to what you want to accept in terms of your award offers. Special circumstances, we know that circumstances change from the time that you complete the FAFSA until the time that you are actually coming to school, such as bankruptcy or changes in your employment. Maybe you have extra medical expenses, dependent care, or one-time incomes, or a change in marital status. We have a way of obtaining documentation to determine whether or not we can make a change to the federal formula to change that EFC or expected family contribution that we talked about earlier. And this a lot of times can assist students in getting additional grant aid, such as the Pell Grant, or maybe you had a subsidized or an unsubsidized loan that will change it to a subsidized loan. So we do have ways to look at your special circumstance and to change, potentially change, you know, the federal expected family contribution number to potentially allow you to be eligible for grant aid or for need-based aid. So Vicki, would you like to wrap it up for us with final thoughts?
Sure. what we want everybody to understand is that it seems complicated, but give it a shot. Absolutely go out and apply for funding. Everybody should try to complete the FAFSA. Utilize their resources because it's well worth the investment of your time. You will get money to help you pay for college, and it's what we want to achieve for every student.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much, Karen and Vicki, for a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I jumped in ahead of you, Emma. Go ahead and have some final wrap-up thoughts there.
No, you were gonna say, I think exactly what I was going to say. Just thank you all so much. I think in the chat, you'll see the answers to some of the common questions. I think the common denominator from all of those is if you're not sure, go utilize the financial aid office of any school that you're looking at, utilize your counselors and those at your high school that are able to answer those questions, but ultimately those financial aid representatives at those colleges are going to be most helpful.
Wonderful. Great. And then just some final wrap-up information from me. So when we close out this session today, you will be directed to a very brief 5-question survey. So I'd appreciate your feedback on that. And again, right after this, in just about, 13 minutes or so, we will have some other sessions kicking off. So please go to the strivescan.com/GPACAC website, and you will be able to sign up for those as well as see all of the recordings. All right. Well, thank you again to our wonderful panelists, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your evening. Bye.